Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, thank you, everybody. Nicole, roll call, please.
Yes, just one moment, please. All right. Youth Commissioner DeAndre Lindsay,
Present.
Commissioner Eric Altman,
Present.
Commissioner Andrew Goff,
Present.
Vice Chair Devet Mohammed is absent this evening. Commissioner Crystal Malari,
Present.
and Chair Brando Cruz.
Present. Okay, moving on to public comment. This time is reserved for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on items of interest that are not on the agenda and are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. It is recommended that speakers limit their comments to 3 minutes each, and it is requested that no comments be made during this period on items on the agenda. Members of the public wishing to address the Planning Commission on items on the agenda should comment via email prior to the start of the meeting, or to verbally comment on the item during the meeting. Click the Raise Your Hand button if joining by computer, or press *9 if joining by phone. When the item is called, the Planning Commission is prohibited by law from taking any action on matters discussed that are not on the agenda, and no adverse conclusions should be drawn if the Planning Commission does not respond to public comment at this time. Speakers are asked to please speak clearly and provide their name. Any handouts for distribution to the Planning Commission must be emailed by 3 p.m. on today's date. The blue cards?
So we don't.
Fran Lemus, can you hear me? I keep seeing on my phone an ad for low residents in American Canyon apartments. Now, is that the apartments that are built? It doesn't give an address. Does anybody else get that on their phone? I'll see if I can find it. If I can, I'll ask Brent about it later. I'm just wondering where they were, because it's an ad. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Fran. I can't say I've had that ad. Any more speakers?
Yes, we have Justin Hole on Zoom. Justin, just bear with me one moment while I unmute you. All right, Justin, please.
Good evening. I am Justin Ho. I live here for 39 years. I know I'm very patient. A very patient new house, Washington Caring, Dunmore, and there's nobody there build a house or new sidewalk. And it's very difficult because there's a lot of grass need to mow on the hill. And I think it's time to build a house over there because there's no house on the hill. Washington Caring, Dunmore. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin, for your comment. Are there any more comments on Zoom?
We have no more speakers.
At this time, I close public comment. Moving on to agenda changes. Director Cooper, are there any agenda changes?
Yes, Chair Cruz, we have no agenda changes tonight.
Thank you, Director Cooper. Okay, at this time, I'd like to announce the consent calendar, and I'd like to entertain a motion.
I'll move that we adopt the consent calendar.
I'll second.
We have a first and a second. Roll call, please.
Yes, Commissioner Eric Altman,
Aye.
Commissioner Andrew Goff,
Aye.
Commissioner Crystal Malari, and Vice Chair Devet Mohammed is absent. Chair Brando Cruz.
Aye.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to public hearing. And we have a presentation by staff. Director Cooper.
Thank you, Chair Cruz, members of the Planning Commission, and members of the studio audience. See you tonight. Brent Cooper, Community Development Director, and pleased to present to you an update to our design permit processing. This is a very frequently used application in the Community Development Department, and for future development comes from the Planning Commission. So this is somewhat of an exciting moment. This all is brought about because of the housing element. And so there are many ways in which cities regulate land use, and the idea of the housing element is to make sure that there is housing needs for the community, with a big emphasis on affirmatively furthering fair housing and making sure that the rules that we have are objective and fair for everybody. And so this effort here is part of the implementation plan for the housing element, of which there are about 70 implementation plans, and of those 70, some of them have subsets. So there's a lot of things we have to do for the housing element, so I'll be coming back here with different things over the next 8 years. And so this is one of them. And so tonight, what this is all about is revising the design permit application to remove subjectivity in the way that applications are reviewed as defined by the zoning code. As staff, we have thank you. Always made sure that our review is objective. Staff isn't inserting its own personal opinions. We adhere to code and policy that's been adopted by the City Council and state law and such. So the zoning code, particularly when it comes to the design permits, was adopted back in 2001, I think much earlier in the city's history, when there weren't a lot of policies. And so perhaps the reason there's subjectivity in the design permit application is we just didn't have policies. So it was kind of left to staff to use its judgment and then elevate things to the Planning Commission and see if you agreed with that. And over time, probably the decisions led to different policies and kind of codification of what it is that the community wants for itself. But today's a different day, and we have so many different policies and things to work from that we don't need that anymore. And it's just a fairer process. So for those that don't work with this every day, you might wonder, well, what exactly is a design permit? And so this is what's known as an entitlement. This is an approval that the city grants to a property owner or developer when they build a new site. Usually, because we have so much open land in American Canyon, they're looking at a site that hasn't ever been built. But it could also apply to something where old buildings are torn down and new ones are built in its place. So it really has to do with the physical design of a new property and the buildings that go with that. And so when we have an application like that, the design permit's intended to make sure that all the different development standards are met. And so the most common ones we have is in the zoning code has setbacks, parking standards, height limits, landscape plans, but there's also engineering design standards, there's water quality design standards, there's the California Environmental Quality Act. We also have policies, some very specific in the general plan itself. And then, of course, we're very familiar because we see a lot of projects in Watson Ranch. There are a host of very specific requirements for Watson Ranch. And so if we have a project there, we want to make sure that we are making sure that the project includes those things. So it's really a check to make sure that all the different standards that are there are adhered to. Most projects, design permits, come to the Planning Commission, but there are some small ones that the zoning code says can be approved by the Community Development Director. And these don't happen very often, but they're just small commercial buildings or relatively small warehouses, which we don't generally get small warehouses here. So it's very limited in number. I was trying to think of how many design permits I've approved in my 16 years here, and it's just a handful. Interestingly, when we're looking at the design permit zoning, I kind of elevated and noticed that there's some overlap in what the design permit says, types of applications that the design permit applies to, also applies to another section of the zoning code called major and minor modifications. So the zoning code today says if you're modifying a building, or you're expanding a building, or you're changing the use of a building, it needs a design permit. And then we have another part of the zoning code that says the very same thing, needing a major or minor modification. So this is an opportunity to kind of clean those things up. And so since we have a process, the minor and major modification process, we're going to leave that alone, and it will address, it provides guidance on when some small changes can be approved by staff, or when it has to come back to the Planning Commission, or in some cases, the City Council. And just kind of strike that from the design permit so there's no confusion as to who's on first. If you're still maybe wondering what design permits are all about, here's some pictures of projects that have recently come to the Planning Commission for design permit approval. And for the scholars in the room, you might notice that the lower left one there is the chicken guy. And you're probably thinking, wait a minute, Brent, that one had a conditional use permit. I don't remember a design permit. Well, the zoning code says that what a conditional use permit says is there are some uses in the zoning code where the Planning Commission has discretion to decide whether or not that use is appropriate in that location. And so it's not, the conditional use permit aspect isn't looking at all those design permit things. It's just looking at deciding whether or not this is a good idea in this place. And if it is, then we make sure all the design standards are met. So there's kind of two layers to a conditional use permit when you're building a new building. And that would be an example here for the chicken guy. But other than that, everything has a design permit. So the conditional use permit when you're building something really encompasses everything that would be in a design permit. So what are we doing to the process? And I have some detailed red line strikeouts in the staff report and the resolution, and we have it over there if you want to look at it. I'm going to summarize it for you, and then you'll kind of get where we're going. There's different components to the zoning code for a design permit. In the very beginning, it talks about the purpose. So today, the purpose is ensure excellence in applying adopted standards. And all of our standards are excellent, so we make sure that that's done. But today, it talks about harmonious building appearance. Is it compatible with the surrounding community? Does it produce a stable character? Those are all things that are already covered in our standards. Like if I say back in 2001, we probably didn't have those things, but now we do. So we can strike those ones and just ensure that our adopted standards are implemented with excellence. So it's very objective because we're looking back into our adopted standards. In terms of the another section called the design permit approval, so this would be what does this apply to? Today, I mentioned new construction and then enlargements and alterations. So we mentioned we have another section in the code that deals with enlargements and alterations. So we're going to strike that here just to clean it up, and it applies to new construction. So it's nice and simple. Interestingly enough, the scope, so what are you evaluating when you're looking at these things? And so what we're proposing is that we ensure the documents comply with standards. Today, what it talks about is essentially what is staff's opinion on the appropriateness of the compliance? How do we feel about the building materials? Do we like the relationship of the buildings with the surrounding community and the architecture? Like I say, we don't need staff to have their opinions anymore because we have standards. And if we are missing something that comes to the Planning Commission and you say, you know, there's something about this project I don't like and we don't have a standard to deal with it, then typically the process would be that you would elevate that request to the City Council, and the City Council would assign staff the task to create a standard. We wouldn't just do it on a whim, case by case. And then when we're looking at findings of approval, this is part of the documentation that the Planning Commission approves in a resolution that literally talks about exactly why it's okay to approve the project. And so the findings of approval are limited to objective description of how the project complies with standards. The findings today talk about how do you feel about the appropriateness of the development and the building materials and things. Typically, what we've done is we've elaborated on the development standards, but there's some redundancy among the findings because we're already talking about it, an A and B, and then C is like, well, how do you feel about it? Well, we've already told you what it does. How we feel about it doesn't really matter because we're not the ones that make the decisions. It's the council that adopts the standards that we follow, not what staff thinks. So that's just been very important to me and our department, and it's a practice we're doing. So we're just finding that when we're writing standards, writing these findings, we're sort of repeating ourselves a lot because we're not creating things on our own opinion. So that's kind of basically what it's all about. This is also zone changes and things are subject to the California Environmental Quality Act, and we have a very tidy exemption here because we're consistent with state law. We're not applying discretion. It's something that's required per our housing element, so it's exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. So that's my brief presentation, and glad to answer any questions. It is a public hearing, so glad to hear from anybody who like to participate.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for Director Cooper? At this time, I open it up to public comment.
If there's anybody on Zoom who would like to speak, please raise your hand now. It appears we have no public comment.
At this time, I close public comment. Planning Commissioners, your comments.
Just a quick question, just in regards to all the, it's a generalized question, all the policies that we do currently, that we're responsible for here for the planning commission, starting to kind of get that in plan, review all of them, or how does?
We do. When we have a development application, we have a team of staff from various disciplines, from the fire district and from public works, and obviously planning, building, and so they all review them and from their various areas of expertise. So they all have their own bundle of standards that they're in charge of. And so it's our job to review all those that apply and bring them to the attention of the applicant if they're missed, and make sure that the plans are revised and corrected. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Commissioner Altman?
Nothing on this one. You're lucky.
Commissioner Golf? Commissioner Lindsay? No? Oh, okay, we'll reopen public comment.
Beth Marcus, resident. I don't know if I missed this or not. Is this new or has this been in existence? What does that mean?
The design permit application process has been in existence since at least 2001. It may have been earlier and then modified in 2001, but it's a very, very frequently used application that comes to the Planning Commission.
I have a question. How did you design the apartments? The apartments. It seems to me, I remember when we built out American Canyon, they kind of kept things in like Walmart and kind of the same order, as far as design is. And then all of a sudden we have this building that's a big square building that doesn't seem to fit in. I wondered, I don't remember ever hearing about the design of that apartment complex. It's not that it's ugly, it's just that, to me, it doesn't fit in with the rest of our building. And also the same with the hotel across the road. It's so square, and ours always have a little kind of a roofer. Anyway, I just kind of wondered how that design got in like it is. Thank you.
Okay. Well, there's actually, each of those has a little different background. There are design standards in the Broadway District Specific Plan, and that was adopted through public workshops on sort of a modern industrial style and kind of a modern farmhouse style. And so the applicants for the Napa Cove kind of looked at the modern industrial style because farmhouse for a 3-story apartment didn't seem to lend itself well. And secondly, housing, especially affordable housing and other housing where there are state laws that require a streamlined review, it has removed the city's discretion to regulate the architecture unless there are objective design standards adopted, which we haven't done yet. Although I was in a workshop this morning, the Association of Bay Area Governments hosted a webinar on objective design standards. So I've got a lot of information and it's on my list of things to do. But the city has very little authority to dictate the architecture of a lot of new housing now. And so we'll be having some workshops, which I'm sure you'll probably enjoy and participate, I hope you will, in objective design standards because it'll help clarify what we want buildings to look like. Now, across the highway in Home to Suites, the Hilton Home to Suites is a corporate brand, and they have kind of a specific appearance for that brand, so that when you look at the building, I'm talking kind of the way they would say it. When you look at the building, you want it to look like a Home to Suites hotel. So if you look around the country, we did some research when we got the application because the standard appearance that they gave us, it's a very, very flat, boxy building, and that's just their corporate brand. So we looked at a lot of different Home to Suites around the country to see if there are ways that we can get some depth to the windows, maybe some different colors, to not make it look so flat and boxy. But we didn't feel we had the authority to make a wholesale architectural change to it. If you look at also what's next door on either side, the Palby's building is somewhat plain looking. It's not. You don't have gingerbread and pitches and shingles. It's kind of a very kind of straightforward, sort of modern building. It was obviously a different one in the past, and it was updated about 20 years ago to kind of looking newer. So, and then on the other side, the hotel, the Fairfield Suites itself is kind of a modern, I'm not quite sure how to describe the architecture there, but it's eclectic, maybe we could say. So part of the objectives with the Broadway plan is that we don't have jarring contrasts where you have maybe like take Palby's Junction, kind of a very sort of straightforward, plain, almost like this building, stucco and thing, and then have something completely different, like the Hampton Inn. That one's very different looking, if you think about the way that one was approved, because right next to it is Rick Hess's project, which is very farmhouse and agricultural and wood. If you were to put that there, it would look strikingly different than the hotel to the right and Palby's Junction. So the idea somewhat, and we can disagree on whether it was done well at the end, is to sort of fit new buildings into what's next to it so that it sort of looks organic, without jarring changes. But the architecture, maybe to answer your question directly, Fran, it did come to the Planning Commission and it is agenda item. So, yeah, I guess we just didn't linger on, maybe on the architecture long enough. And things, when they're in renderings, maybe look one way, and then when they're built, like, oh, it looked nicer on the screen, but then in real life. And that's always a challenge too. I don't think the colors quite turned out as I expected with the home to suites, but maybe it's a matter of getting used to it. There is a lot of landscaping setback in the front, and someday that will get planted and it'll grow, and so you'll kind of see a filtered look on the building over time because it is set back quite away from the highway. And then the same is true with Napa Cove. Right now, there's no landscaping at all, but there will be landscaping and trees. I don't know if you've noticed or not, but the overhead utilities have been removed, which is a big improvement. So you might not like the building, but you probably like the utilities gone. So, you win some, you lose some, maybe, I don't know. But it's an interesting effort, and it maybe gets used to, but also, I think we're all kind of doing the best we can, and maybe the next time we have an application that comes up, we'll all take a closer look at the screen and see how we feel about it.
If I can jump in and add a little more color, just because I recall particularly, no, this is on, this is responding to Fran's comment, just adding on to Brent. So, yeah, it's I recall when it came to the commission, and I recall the discussion and the fact that it was a Hilton corporate standard, which I don't think any of us on the commission at that point were particularly thrilled with. But it was one of these things where, do we want this or do we want to say no, is sort of the way it seemed to be coming across. And I was like, yeah, so it won't be the prettiest building in town, but I will, again, agree with your comments in terms of the colors. We knew there were some things, and I believe we did get some modifications off of the standard Hilton home to suites look that have improved it a little bit. But I think the colors aren't quite what we were necessarily envisioning when we were looking at the renderings that were provided. Napa Cove, I don't recall as clearly as to whether there was a whole lot of conversation on the overall architecture. I think there was some questions about windows and doors and stuff like that, but I don't know that there was, in terms of kind of like the building shape overall. So I hope that helps and adds a little bit of color for you, Fran.
Well, thank you for the questions, Fran, Beth, and the explanation, Director Cooper. Are there any more questions from the public here? Any on Zoom?
Yes, we have Justin Hall who would like to speak. Justin, just bear with me for 1 second. All right, you are unmuted, Justin.
Good evening. I am Justin Hall, and it's nice to see Brett Cooper. My question is, in the future, when we get a new city website for July, I want to see if we can look up what is going on in new building, and we can just have on a public comment. Public people can see on email newsletter on there and see, oh, this one is gonna be coming up, new house gonna come up news, or new hotel. I thinking in our future, I think it's gonna be on newsletter, and I would love to see all the new building on my email. Thank you.
All right. Oh, thank you, Justin. I think what you were referring to is once it goes through the planning process, at some point, hopefully, it gets built. And that's a little bit of a gap that we have in our outreach. We were just talking about that issue yesterday at the management meeting, and so I think we're going to be looking at starting something in the fall to begin. We do a lot of really good outreach with letting people know that something is submitted for a planning and all of that, but then sort of picking that concept up as things move forward to construction, so that people get a sense of here's what's coming sooner than maybe 10 years from now.
Yeah, it's like a update. When I get my newsletter on Mary Keenan website, I will get my email too. And I think that is my good for future for everybody.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Big
thank you.
Clipper.
I think we're all thinking the same thing.
Great, thank you, Justin. Are there any more comments on Zoom? Nicole?
There are not.
At this time, I close public comment and reopen to the commissioners. Any other comments from the commissioners?
Yeah, I just got one. Just for clarity, you had mentioned, Brent, the affordable housing code removes the city's authority on kind of just the architecture. Is that for, like, is there a percentage that the development has to be affordable housing that a city can provide their opinions and thoughts on that architecture, or is it just if it's affordable housing?
Actually, it's not just affordable housing. There are a variety of other state laws that, for various circumstances and reasons, enables the developer to have what the state calls a streamlined approval. There are, I didn't bring it with me, but there is I can do a follow-up. There are about 5 or 6 state laws that speak to the ability for a developer to streamline their housing, and it doesn't all have to be affordable. And when they have a streamlined process, then the city has no say in the architecture and appearance of the building unless you cite adopted objective design standards. I know that we had a lot of comments on the proposed apartment projects on the residences north of there, and it was subject to SB 330 streamline, and they're like, thanks, but no thanks. We're going to do what we want to do. They have since, they're rethinking their whole project right now, so we'll take another crack at it later. But yeah, they pretty much just told us to pound sand.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to comment on it. Brent's right. I think the total is like now 6 pieces of state legislation that fit under this umbrella of streamlining the process. But I think one thing that's striking from my point of view, I discussed it briefly with Brent, and doesn't really involve the city, but one of those bills was SB 9 that dealt with the ability of a single lot owner to basically create 4 units. And a series of cities in both San Diego and Orange County filed an action against the state on that. And the trial court decision came out last Thursday and said it was unconstitutional. Now, I think it's unusual because the League of California Cities and one other city from Orange County filed an amicus brief against the position taken by those 6 cities, all of whom are charter cities. So, you know, there's a division. And the decision's striking. It's just trial court, of course. So, you know, the Attorney General said, well, we're evaluating whether we're going to appeal. Well, of course they're going to appeal. But the way that the court reasoned was to say, you know, look, there's an inherent basis in the Constitution, the police power, for all local government for land use, and then it singled out charter cities, and it says it's even stronger for them. And it also went into the basis of the legislation, and it said, this may create more housing, but there's no guarantee that it's going to create affordable housing. So, you know, I'm not going to caution or say anything like that, but you know, the legislature sometimes gets in these lockstep things where they just crank it out and they say, this is gonna generate more housing, and it's gonna be affordable, and that's it. And, you know, there's, whatever, Brent probably remembers, but aren't there like 586 cities now? And, you know, about 120 of them are charter. And, you know, you may remember there are some ridiculous reactions. Like Woodside about a year ago said, well, we're not going to comply with SB 9 because we think the whole city's an endangered habitat for mountain lions, right? So, you know, the idea of local control is really strong. And, you know, I just say I would view the Orange County thing as maybe a bellwether to think maybe a lot of this state legislation about, you know, generating housing more quickly, maybe, you know, was too lockstep, deserved a little bit more analysis, you know, that kind of thing. It's not really an issue, of course, for the city because, you know, because the staff and the city council, we've been able to meet the regional housing needs assessment both the last cycle and looks like we're golden for this next cycle. But, you know, that's not the state, or that's not the condition statewide. And for a court to say that legislation in this package really doesn't relate to affordability, I think has some merit with some of the other ones. Doesn't do, excuse me, other pieces of state legislation. It doesn't do any good to generate housing if you're not gonna address the affordability issue. It's just a comment, but, you know, sometimes you just get this continual, I don't know, resounding, almost PR effort from the legislature to say, and now we've got another one that really, that we think will help in addressing affordable housing. I think based on this litigation, you gotta kind of pause and say, well, whether or not it benefits housing, it's gonna be where it's applied. And then I think that's where you look particularly to American Canyon, because everything that was done here was done before all that stuff in the legislature. So if you did it under the old matrix, right, well, can't other people? You know, so, and you know, all of you travel, you've seen some of the other areas where, okay, if this is supposed to be working, then why is all there this vacant commercial office space? Why is there still the need for more housing and so forth? And, you know, I think that's right where I'd like to stop, but I just want to bring that up. Thanks.
Thank you, Attorney Ross, for that in-depth explanation. Any other comments from our commissioners? No. Okay, I'm going to circle back to design permit modifications. I think, first of all, it was great. It was streamlined. All the subjective and redundant language was removed. Great job, Brett. At this time, I'd like to entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to adopt a resolution for the Planning Commission of the City of American Canyon recommending the City Council of the City of American Canyon amend American Canyon Municipal Code Chapter 19.14 design permits consistent with state law and Housing Element Implementation Program C.
I will second the short guy's motion.
It's been regularly moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Yes, Commissioner Eric Altman,
Aye.
Commissioner Andrew Goff,
Aye.
Commissioner Crystal Malare,
Aye.
Vice Chair Devet Mohammed is absent, Chair Brando Cruz.
Aye. Okay, thank you, everybody, commissioners. Moving on to business. Pro-Housing Incentive Program update. Director Cooper.
All right, thank you, Chair Cruz and Planning Commission and our public today. So I wanted to let you know about an opportunity that the city should take advantage of. As we know, American Canyon has excellent development standards and policies that further housing. which by the way is, if you think about, don't we all live in houses at some type? I mean, housing is the building block of a community. And so it's a very good thing. It brings about all of us together as a community, and that's how come we can have awesome events in our parks and meet me in the streets. It brings customers for restaurants and services that we all enjoy. It employs people for construction and maintenance. It does a lot of good things. So, it can kind of get a bad rap when you have the state mandating things. It just kind of makes everyone feel bad. But if you step back for a minute and think about it, it's really healthy that people want to invest money in American Canyon and spend their money here and improve our property values and bring people in to shop at our stores and things. So all of these policies we have help facilitate an open environment. I was just corresponding with KB Home. They're looking at purchasing a lot in Watson Ranch and building houses, and they have a lot of questions about our development processes, and I'm going to answer them in a timely manner and consult with others who can help answer the rest. But so we're doing things to help people make it easy so they can invest their money and build an American Canyon and grow our community. And so all of these policies here together can bundle, in my words, into a pro-housing perspective. There was an initiative a number of years ago in 2017 where the voters of California voted an additional fee on real estate transactions, and the money for it is going into a pot statewide to help fund affordable housing. And so now that the state's growing all this money, they need to find a way in which to allocate it to worthy jurisdictions to use it. And so the State Department of Housing and Community Development established what's called a pro-housing incentive program. And so there's some criteria in order to qualify, and among it is a certified housing element, which we have. And then there's a variety of policies that the state is asking, have you adopted these things? And they have a point value. So if you can identify enough of these policies and add up the points, and if you reach 30, it's a magic number, along with a resolution of support from the City Council, then you should qualify for a pro-housing designation. And then that opens the door to access this money that the state is collecting from real estate transactions. Interestingly enough, there are, of the 480 jurisdictions, those are cities and counties in California, only 47 have so far qualified. So there is a very limited pool of cities and counties that can access this money. So if American Canyon can submit its application, then that opens up our opportunity to get funding through this program, which would be very nice. So we're going to work on the architecture, Fran, and stuff, and we'll get there. But we might as well take advantage and get some benefit from the policies that we have. And so this is kind of what I'm here to share with you is we're have drafted up an application. It's going to be going to the City Council on May 7 to get an approved resolution support. And then also we have a letter from Fair Housing Napa Valley supporting our application, and I suspect we may be getting some others as well. So I wanted to let you know about that, and wish us luck to get in there, and then hopefully we'll be able to qualify for additional funding for housing.
Well, thank you, Director Cooper. Planning Commission commissioners, what are your questions? Commissioner Altman.
How many points have we earned?
I was conservative with the way in which I graded us, and I reached 31.
Now, if you were more liberal?
Perhaps more. They have this feature here where they just have the policies and you add them all up, and then there are these enhancement points, which is a little confusing to understand. So I was very careful to not rely on them. But I imagine if I became better conversant, I could probably bolster it. But 30 is 30.
Right. No, that's awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions from the commissioners?
Just for clarity, what can you use the funds for?
It's intended to be used to further affordable housing. So the city has affordable housing fund. It's an impact fee on new commercial development and residential development when they don't provide affordable housing as part of their project, when they can demonstrate that it's economically infeasible. An example, we have two examples. One is Canyon Estates, where the homes there are a lot of money. So to think that a portion of them would be affordable to very low income people is probably not feasible. And then the now Domain project on Oat Hill, when it was Rick Hess's entitlement brought it, they had an economist look at all the costs and adding in the cost for affordable housing made the project infeasible. And you can imagine, because they're literally moving mountains up there, that I'm sure that the site preparation is really expensive, and they have all the water utilities and sewer, just everything's got to get brought up that hill. So I'm sure it's a very expensive site to build on. So they're subject to housing impact fees. So what goes into a regulated pool of funds that can be then used to help leverage grants or helps offset cost for other developers to build housing. And so this would help bolster that fund, because housing, as we all know, is very expensive, and so is affordable housing, because not only is it just expensive to build new housing, but if you think about it, this is housing that doesn't yield a market value of rent, so it's subsidized. So if you just think about something that you build and then have to subsidize for 55 years, well, that subsidy's got to come from somewhere. So it makes it very expensive.
And a follow-up with that, and what is the criteria or the process that we grant to have those funds available for a developer? Does it go just directly to City Council for approval?
It does go to City Council, and we haven't had enough money to be able to really shop, building something. Bless you. We did, for the Valley View project, it was really an opportunity that fell in our laps. The economy back in 2007, 8, housing collapsed, and the project that was approved there went foreclosure, and so the city was able to purchase that property. It just came available, we were able to purchase it for a really good deal. So it was this opportunity that just had to grab. So that's happened with that one. And then, as it turns out, over time, it's expensive to build housing, and they did come back essentially to the well to get additional support just to make it happen. And then they also got it from the county as well. I mean, it just needs a lot of money to build these things. So we're not really flush with funds. If we were, we'd probably be more active. But we're slowly, building up some more. This would be a real shot in the arm, and then might open up opportunities that we could then kind of look around and see what's right.
Got one chair. Director Cooper, would this money be available for ADUs?
Potentially, yes. They're actually, the city has funds, or should have funds, for ADU construction, and we partner with the city of Napa for that program, and they were taking the lead. This was a little more than a year ago, and we actually, there is funds that is allocated to American Canyon through, I think, a similar portion of this funding program. And the state changed the rules. It was very frustrating because it all got lined, went to the council, got approved, and this would be forgivable grants for people who build accessory dwelling units and then rent them to people of lower income. And so there's a portion of the loan that gets forgiven each year. There is actually a county program that American Canyon residents can qualify for ADU construction. But we would also have our own funds, but there was a change in the way in which the state qualified cities that related to the housing element that was different than when it was advertised. So we're working with the City of Napa. They were in the same boat as us, and so we're kind of working with them to bring that one back. But there is funding today through the county for people who build accessory dwelling units and then rent them to lower income people.
Thank you. Any other questions? At this time, I open public comment.
There appears to be no public comment.
At this time, I close public comment. Commissioners, any other comments? Nope. Okay. Well, for the record, consider the pro-housing incentive program update received and filed.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, moving on to management and staff oral reports. Director Cooper.
Thank you. Nicole, if I could impose on you, I remember this morning you had something very interesting that's coming up. That might be interesting. Meet me in the streets, perhaps?
Oh. I was going to wait until next month, but you put me on the spot. Yes, so Meet Me in the Streets is coming up again in June. It's June, July, and August. And we have our table out there. And so I want to encourage, I will be out there all three events, but I would like to encourage our commissioners to come out. And Brett and I had talked about doing things a little differently this year and maybe having a focus for each one.
Yeah. There's a variety, actually, among the 70-plus implementation measures for the housing element. There are a variety of outreach efforts the city is required to do every year. And so we're going to take a second look at them, kind of drill down and see which might lend themselves to hosting at a Meet Me in the Streets style event. So we can kind of check off the box and make sure that we get the word out on a host of different issues that is in the housing element.
The dates are finalized?
I'll email those to you. Yeah, I know the first one's June 12th. It's the first Wednesday of every month. I just don't have all the dates memorized. Second Wednesday, sorry.
That's right. Okay, and I have our active projects list, and I'll just go over some of the highlights. Let's see, on our first page, the Lodge Apartments gated entry. We did just get a resubmittal of that. We had given them comments on their application. There were some engineering standards that it didn't comply with. And so we pointed some of those things out. And so that just came back in, so we're looking forward to that. This is a minor modification. So there was a design permit for the project back in the day, and they're modifying it through criteria that enabled it to be approved by staff through a minor modification. Sun Square, number 4, is also another minor modification. They were approved by the Planning Commission, and they're making a couple changes to some of their balconies and some of the setbacks. We also have our first building permit application for that. It's a phase project, so it'll be one of the buildings. So we're excited to see that one come along. That's our first truly mixed-use project in the city. Let's see, the Canyon Cafe design permit. This would be one that's minor enough that staff would approve. In front of Canyon Cafe, the new owners have proposed to park a food truck. So we've been working with them, making sure that there's enough room for people to get around. There's accessibility standards for the width that you need to have available for wheelchair access to get around it. If you look at the parking lot in front there, it's not that deep. And so we want to make sure that there's enough proper, safe room for people to get around. They'll be adding some parking in the back to make up for it.
Food truck is going to be serving their food, or are they looking to
It would be their own food truck. I don't believe their plans is to circulate them, but I can't say that we asked the question. We tend to look at things, a food truck is a food truck is a food truck. But it would be, I think, just interesting to know, maybe it's, if it were circulated, that would kind of change the cuisine, wouldn't it? And probably a good idea. Yeah. Let's see. Our number 10, the SDG 220 conditional use permit, new warehouse, the third and final one over there on Commerce Court. They're preparing an environmental impact report, and I know I've reviewed the whole thing. I think Bill's office has finished its review, and I think everyone's already finished its review and got it back to the applicant consultant to prepare. So we're looking forward to that being circulated to the public and moving that one along. It's just like the other two buildings, so there's not a lot of surprises apart from just making sure that the environmental review is finished. We have a lot of construction going on, as you know. I don't really have a whole lot to report other than Home to Suites is moving forward again. They had a stop work order because they had a rash of construction that they had done without having the proper inspections. So they were just jumping forward when they should be calling for inspections, and so we had to finally just say, you gotta stop, get it sorted out. Pardon me? Oh, the inspectors go out there and they're like, you've covered up work that needs to be inspected. You need to stop that. And then uncover it. Uncover what you've covered up so we can inspect it to make sure it's done right. So they've kind of, I think, learned, and we're working better now. Let's see, on city-initiated projects, the City Council approved the accessory dwelling unit ordinance and housing element implementation. We brought that to the Planning Commission back in March. The Council approved that in April, so that's nice to get that done. And then our comprehensive general plan update, we met with our consultants recently. The city has done so many things in the last 9 months that will make the general plan better. Among them, the first of its kind in the Bay Area industrial greenhouse gas standards, our vehicle miles traveled policies, updates to the Paoli-Watson area, update to the Watson Ranch. We've been amending the general plan so much we can't get around to amending the general plan, it seems. So there are a number of things that have happened that needs to all get folded now back into the environmental review in particular. And so our consultants are doing that, as well as amendments to the maps and some other things to update it. And so we're hoping to have the environmental impact report for the general plan released for the public in the fall. So that's our. Let's see, and I mentioned lot 7 in Watson Ranch, new single-family homes on small lots. So they should be a little more affordable, maybe than the ones that are already there. Is an application we're looking at. And then also talking to Mr. Crisp on top of Oat Hill with a conditional use permit for wine tasting. For what? Wine tasting. Oh. So that would be coming to the Planning Commission. So he provided a preliminary submittal package, and we have a few minor comments. So I expect that should come soon. So that's my update for you.
Director Cooper, thank you very much. Seems like we're well ahead of greenhouse gases, and we're like the poster children for that, especially with the RENA. So we're moving on to commissioner items. Commissioners, do you have any items? Commissioner Malari?
No, I'll just sign up for the city community industries, but I like the idea of having more focus. That's always been engagement with the residents.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Commissioner Altman?
I've got to check the race schedule, but if I'm around, I plan on being at the Meet Me in the Streets, and we'll be happy to, my son's race schedule, because we're all over the country, especially in the summertime when school's out. So, and I will also take the opportunity to wish any other members of the Jewish community locally a Zissen Pesach. Happy Passover.
Commissioner Goff,
I have nothing, thank you.
Commissioner Lindsay.
Nothing as well, thank you.
Thank you. I, too, as well, will volunteer for the Meet Me in the Street boots. We'll collaborate with Malari, with Commissioner Malari, and we'll do that for you. And one more thing, I'd like to wish our attorney, Bill Ross, a happy birthday this weekend. I only know this, I'll always remember this because he shares the same birthday as my daughter, Cassandra. Happy birthday, Bill.
Happy birthday.
Okay.
Happy birthday, Billy.
That's
How
it.
do we embarrass you?
Okay, time is 7:31, meeting adjourned.
Okay, wait. Let me turn off the mic.